Jasmine Crockett just made the biggest mistake of her political career. She arrogantly called Karoline Leavitt a political toddler and Trump's puppet, right at the congressional hearing. Big mistake. Leavitt fired back. Congresswoman Crockett explained the leaked emails, the recordings, and the shady funding that's made you suspiciously wealthy. What happens next will make Crockett's career crumble on live TV. Hit the like button, because you're about to witness the most brutal political takedown Washington has ever seen. Unreleased evidence will leave you stunned. Jasmine Crockett thought shouting could drown out the truth. She was wrong. When faced with a young opponent, armed with solid evidence, her arrogance is nothing but a tattered mask. This is the day America sees a congresswoman's deafening silence in the face of truth. It was an ordinary morning in Congress, but what happened changed American politics forever. The congressional hearing room was packed, lights glaring down on the long table where the two main figures sat. The air thick as a storm loomed. Karoline Leavitt sat upright, hands resting on a thick file, her calm eyes scanning the room. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett was ready to unleash her signature arrogance. Hair pulled high, vibrant suit, her voice booming as if to command the stage. Karoline Crockett emphasized each syllable like a blade slicing the air. You're just a political toddler, inexperienced, immature, and nothing more than Trump's puppet. The echo of her insult shook the room, a few chuckles rising from the press row, cameras zooming in to catch every expression. They barely hid their excitement, most believing Crockett would crush her young opponent with her oratorical experience and sharp counterattacks. Reporters typed furiously, confident they were about to witness a televised humiliation. Crockett smirked smugly, as if the performance was over before it began, while Leavitt jotted a few notes, silent to the point of seeming overwhelmed. But then, when everyone thought Leavitt would dodge, she looked up, her eyes, cold as steel, cut through the crowd, her youthful face suddenly radiating a steely resolve. Her voice rang out slowly but firmly, shattering the mocking atmosphere. If you think youth is a weakness, today you'll regret it. That moment landed like a slash through the buzzing air, freezing the room. Smiles faded, keyboards stopped, and the audience suddenly realized this fight wouldn't follow their scripted expectations. The mocking grins on the press row vanished, replaced by anticipation. Says in one sentence, the tide had turned. This was no longer a dull hearing or a predictable takedown. It was a direct, intense, and dramatic clash. Crockett's eyes faltered, her lips twitched slightly, while Leavitt sat tall, hands steady on her file, ready to unveil every hidden truth. Jasmine Crockett, seeing Karoline Leavitt's brief retort silence the room, decided not to give her opponent time to gain momentum. She quickly pulled out a thick file, waving it before the cameras like a stage prop. Let America see the real picture, she said. Her voice soaring, then began reading aloud from bolded text. Karoline Leavitt, born 1997, barely in her 20s. A political resume so short it's outdone by a college student's CV, a media assistant, a speechwriter's lackey, and a humiliating loss in her house race. Yet here she sits, pretending to be an expert on transparency and ethics. A few harsh laughs erupted from the audience, keyboards clacking like hammers pounding Leavitt's image. Crockett sneered, her eyes glinting with glee. America doesn't need a girl reciting Trump's talking points. We need people with experience, with real fight, not a Gen Z kid playing politics like it's a TikTok game. Leavitt stayed silent, sitting upright, eyes locked on her opponent. She let Crockett pour out every taunt, every jab, as if waiting for her to burn out before striking back. Crockett grew more animated, face flushed, hands slamming the file like she was sealing a final verdict. She's not a politician, not a legislator, Crockett concluded, her voice nearly a shout. She's just a Republican marketing product, a walking microphone. In that moment, the room buzzed with murmurs. Some reporters nodded. A few congressmen leaned back in their chairs, seemingly certain Leavitt was cornered. But Karoline remained still, like a rock in a rushing stream. As Crockett paused to sip water, Leavitt slowly set down her pen, looked up, without drama, without raising her voice. She spoke just loud enough for the mic to catch every word. Interesting, Congresswoman, that you think reading my Wikipedia page counts as an argument. The air shifted instantly. The mocking chuckles died, replaced by a tense silence. Leavitt continued, her voice steady, each word landing like a stone in a still pond. You call me a puppet, inexperienced. But because you believe that, you've made a grave mistake. Experience isn't the years spent in Congress. Real experience is standing up when others expect you to fall. And today, I'm here not for you to define who I am, but for America to see what you truly are. The press row fell silent. Cameras zoomed in, capturing Leavitt's eyes. Calm, not angry, but sharp enough to make her opponent freeze. A congressman in the back let out a soft whistle, quickly covering his mouth when he realized the tide had turned. Crockett sat stunned, her hand midair with the water glass, her smug smile gone. Leavitt ended her response with a short, heavy blow. You think I'm naive? I think you're too used to looking down on others. And that arrogance will end your career. The room felt drained of air. A few reporters exchanged glances, wondering if they were witnessing a turning point right at the hearing's start. Hands that once typed confidently now hesitated, awaiting the next move. Meanwhile, Crockett fidgeted, adjusting her mic, searching for words to regain control. But the image of Karoline Leavitt, young, composed, icy, had seared itself into the audience's minds. The opening salvo meant to crush her opponent had been blocked, and the silence enveloping the room signaled the real fight had just begun. The silence hadn't yet lifted when Karoline Leavitt suddenly opened the briefcase in front of her. The soft click of the latch, though quiet, echoed in the taut room, drawing every eye to her. Karoline calmly pulled out a thick file, its pages neatly clipped in a black binder, labeled clearly, Crockett Statements. Cameras zoomed in instantly, the press row raising phones to capture it. Jasmine Crockett raised an eyebrow, trying to maintain her composure, but her hands betrayed her, fidgeting. Leavitt didn't rush, scanning the room, letting the silence stretch like a director building tension before the climax. Then she gently placed the file on the table, touching the mic. I heard you call me inexperienced. So today, to show what real experience looks like, I'll start with your record. The room stirred. Crockett smirked, half laughing, half scoffing, signaling to the press. Here comes another performance. But her smile faded as Leavitt pulled out a highlighted sheet, glaring red. March 1st last year, Leavitt began, her voice clear. You called Texas Governor Greg Abbott Hot Wheels, mocking his disability. I won't add commentary, just let everyone hear it again. She pressed the remote, and the large screen behind lit up. The clip played Jasmine Crockett before a crowd, laughing, delivering the jab as the audience roared. In the hearing room, the clip's laughter echoed, but no one dared laugh today. The air froze, some congressmen winced, and reporters looked up from their keyboards, sensing danger for Crockett. Leavitt stopped the clip, leaving the screen black. Her voice lowered, heavy with weight. Governor Abbott may be a Republican, may be your political rival, but he's also a person, and turning someone's disability into a punchline is the clearest proof of the disrespect you sow. Crockett flushed, jumping in. It was just a joke, a political metaphor, but Leavitt cut her off, not letting her regain footing. A joke? What about when you went on TV, called Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene a bully, but shouted over and interrupted her throughout the debate? Was that a joke too? The screen lit up again, showing Crockett facing Greene in another hearing. Crockett's voice was sharp, relentless, cutting Greene off, ending with a biting, "You're just a bully." In today's room, many sat still, avoiding Crockett's gaze. No one defended her. Leavitt turned to Crockett, eyes icy but voice calm. You love labeling others as bullies, as evil, but that clip shows who's shutting down, overpowering, using shouts instead of reason. That's not debate. It's contempt disguised as a stance. The room was silent. Crockett gripped the table, trying to retort. I fight for justice. I don't stay silent against injustice. Leavitt cut in, this time without a clip. Fighting for justice doesn't mean insulting someone's disability. It doesn't mean calling opponents bullies while acting like one yourself. The justice you claim is just an excuse to flaunt your ego. The room's only sound was the clacking of keyboards. But unlike before, no one smirked. Reporters who once grinned at Crockett's attacks on Leavitt now scribbled intently, as if witnessing a turning point. Democratic congressmen near Crockett avoided her gaze, some shaking their heads. Leavitt closed the file, not reading further. No need for more. She leaned into the mic, delivering a verdict like close. You demand respect, but you sow contempt. The words landed, silent, as a gavel's strike. Crockett sat frozen, mouth slightly open, speechless. The room, from media to guests, understood that just with the first folder, the The battle had tilted toward Karoline Leavitt, and everyone held their breath, wondering how many more masks would this young woman rip off Jasmine Crockett's arrogant face. Jasmine Crockett took a deep breath, trying to reclaim her confidence after the direct hit. She leaned into the mic, her voice rising with indignation. I know why you're here attacking me, Karoline. I know why a white woman, privileged by this system, wants to tear down a black woman. This isn't about truth. It's about you and your side trying to silence voices like mine. It's history repeating itself. Her words sparked a signal, drawing scattered applause from her supporters in the audience. Reporters perked up, eyes gleaming, ready to write headlines about a racial controversy in the hearing. Crockett pressed on, her voice growing bolder. I grew up in a neglected community. I know what injustice feels like. And now, when I stand up, speaking for those without a voice, they call me arrogant. They don't want to hear the truth because it doesn't fit their privilege. The room buzzed, some Democratic congressman nodding along. But Karoline Leavitt didn't flinch. She stayed silent, letting Crockett exhaust her familiar rhetoric, like a prosecutor, waiting for a witness to lie enough to incriminate themselves. As Crockett's rallying cry faded, Leavitt lifted a new file, labeled clearly, Identity Politics. She slammed it onto the table, the thud echoing, startling many. Jasmine Leavitt began, her voice low but firm. You say I want to silence you because you're a black woman. But let me remind you, and everyone in this room, truth has no skin color. And sometimes, you're the one using your identity as a shield to dodge accountability. She pressed the remote, and the large screen lit up, showing a clip from a TV interview months prior. In it, a reporter asked Crockett about a murky campaign expense. Instead of answering, Crockett leaned forward, frowning. Why don't you ask this to my white colleagues? Why is it always aimed at black women? The clip stopped, and the room fell dead silent. Leavitt seized the moment. She held up a newspaper with a bold headline. Crockett dodges finance, questioned by accusing reporter of racism. She raised it for all to see, then set it down, her voice cutting. You didn't answer the question. You didn't provide financial transparency. You turned a legitimate inquiry into an identity performance to avoid the truth, and the press saw through it. Crockett shifted in her seat, about to retort, but Leavitt pressed on. This time, she displayed a tweet from Crockett's own account. Every criticism I get stems from fear of strong black women. Leavitt tilted her head, locking eyes with Crockett. Really? Every criticism? Even from voters in your own district? Black voters who've questioned why you're not present enough in their community. Are they afraid of you too? The room erupted in whispers. Some reporters scrambled to pull up the tweet. Leavitt showed. Congressmen in the back shifted seats, jotting notes. The momentum was clearly with Leavitt. She didn't stop. Flipping to another page, Leavitt read from an investigative article. In multiple hearings, when questioned about spending and donor ties, Jasmine Crockett often redirects to race or gender issues, refusing to provide specific documents. She folded the paper, placed it before Crockett, and looked her in the eye. You say you fight for justice, but the evidence shows you're fighting for yourself and using your identity as a shield. Crockett gripped her mic tightly, hands trembling. A few supporters tried to clap, but were drowned out by the heavy silence enveloping the room. Leavitt ended her counterattack with a slow, cutting line. Respect doesn't come from skin color or gender. Respect comes from actions and consistency. You call for justice but sow conflict. You call for equality but sow division. And today, I only need to show everyone that when your identity shield is stripped away, what's left is just your arrogance. The murmurs stopped. The mocking smiles aimed at Leavitt earlier were gone. Instead, eyes followed her, filled with focus and even admiration. For the first time in the hearing, the balance tipped decisively toward Karoline Leavitt, while Jasmine Crockett sat motionless, realizing her most familiar weapon had been exposed before millions watching live. The tension in the hearing room hadn't settled when Karoline Leavitt opened her briefcase again. A new file hit the table, its red cover bold, labeled in stark print, PACs and donors. The sound of the hard cover hitting wood rang out like a gavel, startling the room. Cameras swiveled to Leavitt, while Jasmine Crockett tilted her head, trying to feign calm, but her eyes betrayed her unease. Leavitt spoke, her voice deliberate and firm. We've talked about your words, about how you use identity to dodge questions. Now, let's talk about what voters care about most: money. Because in this Washington, money is never a small matter. She flipped open the first page, holding it up for all to see. A dense table of numbers appeared on the screen behind her. This is a list of political action committees, PACs, that have funneled over $3.4 million into Jasmine Crockett's campaigns over the past 2 years. Leavitt read slowly, each line like a measured strike. Among them, People's Justice PAC, known for funding radical anti-police activities. Urban Action Fund, criticized for diverting advocacy funds to non-political ventures. And notably, Reform Now PAC, backed by a tech billionaire, who openly said he's willing to buy congressional seats to shape policy. The room buzzed with murmurs. Reporters exchanged glances, typing furiously. Crockett grabbed her mic. Her voice rushed. This is how every campaign works. PACs fund all candidates. There's nothing unusual here. Leavitt raised a hand, cutting her off, eyes fixed on the file. Normal? She flipped to the next page. June 15th, last year, Reform Now PAC sent $150,000 to your campaign. 3 days later, you voted against a bill to tighten oversight on big tech companies. October 2nd, People's Justice PAC sent $95,000. And a week later, you spoke out against additional funding for local police in Dallas, your own district. The room fell silent. Every ear hung on the dates and numbers. Crockett stammered, "That's just a coincidence." But Leavitt didn't let her slip away. Coincidence? What about December 5th? Urban Action Fund sent $200,000, and 2 days later, you signed a letter calling for reduced oversight of nonprofits receiving foreign funds. Another coincidence. Cameras zoomed in on Crockett's face, sweat beading at her temples. Nearby congressmen exchanged looks, some shaking their heads. The murmurs in the room shifted. No longer cheering for Crockett, Leavitt slowly closed the file but kept her hand on it. Her voice grew stronger, filling the room. Voters entrusted you to represent them in Washington, but instead of hearing their voices, you listened to the rustle of dollar bills. Every time money hit your account, your vote shifted. That's not serving the public. That's selling the public. Crockett stood, her voice breaking with anger. I fight for my community. I'm not controlled by anyone. Leavitt didn't raise her voice, just leaned into the mic. If you're truly fighting for your community, explain to them why your funding lines up so perfectly with your decisions. Communities don't need coincidences. They need transparency. In that moment, the screen lit up again, showing a line graph, one side tracking PAC contributions, the other Crockett's voting record. The two lines ran parallel, almost perfectly aligned. No one in the room could call it chance. A New York Times reporter whispered, "My God, this is a real bombshell." A Republican congressman let out a laugh, quickly covering his mouth. But that laugh was enough to signal the scales had tipped decisively in the room. Leavitt turned to Crockett, her voice low but steely. "Jasmine, you can call me naive. You can call me inexperienced. But one thing I'd never do, take money to sell out the voters' voices. What about you? Today, in front of the entire nation, you've been exposed. You chose cash over constituents." The closing line landed like a blade slicing through Crockett's remaining arrogance. The room erupted in louder murmurs, a few whistles, and scattered applause from the back rows. Reporters hunched over, scribbling furiously, phones buzzing as social media lit up. And in the middle of the congressional chamber, Jasmine Crockett, once accustomed to dominating the airwaves with her commanding voice, now sat silent, lips trembling, unable to muster a response strong enough to cover the truth. Karoline Leavitt had laid bare. The room was still buzzing from the cash over constituents jab when Karoline Leavitt gave her opponent no chance to recover. She opened her leather briefcase again, pulling out another file, this one a deep green cover with bold white text, "Foreign Lobbying." An invisible jolt ran through the room. Everyone knew that when foreign was mentioned, this was no longer just domestic politics. It was a matter of national security. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned closer to their laptop screens, waiting for each word like the blast of a cannon. Leavitt adjusted her mic, her voice low but resonant, every word clear. "If the PAC's issue raised questions about your transparency, this next part will make voters question your loyalty." The room shuddered. Crockett swallowed hard, her hand gripping the pen on the table so tightly, its tip trembled. Leavitt flipped to the first page, projecting a long timeline on the screen behind her, neatly divided columns. Date, contribution, vote. She pointed to the first entry, with a red laser pointer. April 12th, 2023. A lobbying group called American Progress Abroad actually a law firm representing the Chinese government's interests, transferred $75,000 to a PAC backing your campaign. 3 days later, April 15th, you voted against a bill tightening oversight on tech companies linked to Beijing. A collective ooh swept the room. Crockett lunged for her mic. Her voice rushed. That was a biased bill. It would have stifled tech innovation and hurt American businesses. Leavitt cut her off, her voice sharp as a blade. So why 3 days earlier did a group directly tied to China send money? Is that tech innovation too? The air grew stifling. Leavitt moved to the next entry, her laser pointer sliding over August 2nd, 2023. Global Justice Alliance, partly funded by Venezuelan businessmen tied to the Maduro regime, sent $50,000. August 5th, you voted against a resolution condemning human rights violations in Venezuela. Keyboards clattered like rainfall. Some congressmen exchanged stunned looks, unable to believe the perfect vote donation alignment. Crockett blinked rapidly, sweat rolling down her temples. She grabbed a tissue to dab it away, but the gesture only highlighted her unease. Leavitt pressed on, flipping another page, her voice calm yet chilling. October 20th, 2023. North Atlantic Friendship Council, a lobbying group suspected of receiving indirect funding from a European energy company, transferred $120,000. A week later, October 27th, you voted against the bill to boost domestic energy production and reduce reliance on European imports. This time, the room erupted in sharp whispers. An opposing congressman blurted, "No way that's a coincidence." Crockett snapped back. "These are just coincidences. I didn't know the deep origins of those funds." Leavitt turned fully to her opponent, her eyes icy. A congresswoman doesn't know the origins of her funding. You expect the public to believe that naivety isn't an excuse. It's proof you're unfit for that seat. The screen flashed a video, a fundraising event where Crockett shook hands with foreign businessmen, one later exposed by the press as a registered lobbyist for a Chinese state-owned company. In the clip, Crockett smiled broadly, raising a glass, proclaiming, "Partnership for the future." When the video cut off, the room sank into a silence, so deep you could hear heartbeats. Leavitt continued, now addressing not just Crockett, but the cameras. The American people deserve the truth. They deserve to know if their votes are being bought with foreign money. We cannot allow a member of Congress to turn their vote into a commodity traded with forces beyond our borders. Crockett sat rigid, clutching her mic, her voice trembling. These are just political accusations. I've never sold out my country. Leavitt closed the file, placing both hands on the table, her voice ringing like a judgment bell. You can deny, you can shout, but numbers don't lie. Videos don't lie. This timeline doesn't lie. And the simple truth is every time you took money, your vote leaned toward them. She paused, locking eyes with Crockett. Each word a hammer strike. You chose foreign interests over Americans. A shockwave rippled through the room. Reporters typed frantically. Phones buzzed as social media exploded. Crockett bowed her head, sweat beading on her forehead, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The room's atmosphere had shifted entirely. From expecting Leavitt's humiliation, everyone now saw who stood on the brink. The hearing room remained heavy after Karoline Leavitt's foreign lobbying salvo. Jasmine Crockett slumped in her chair, her face dotted with sweat, while reporters typed furiously, social media erupting with early comments. Is Crockett compromised? Leavitt just destroyed her. But Karoline wasn't done. She calmly opened her briefcase again, pulling out a thick, glaring yellow file labeled Media Manipulation. The sound of the file hitting the table echoed like a warning bell. Cameras zoomed in, and viewers nationwide leaned closer to their screens. Leavitt spoke, her voice calm but piercing. In this Washington, the media holds immense power. It can make someone a hero or a villain. And you, Jasmine Crockett, have mastered the media, not to tell the truth, but to stage a narrative, to turn yourself into a political star with viral clips. She pressed the remote, and the large screen lit up. A famous Crockett clip played, her standing voice booming, pointing at a Republican congressman, with bold captions, "Crockett shuts down Republican." The video had spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, hailed by friendly outlets as proof of her dominance. In the clip, Crockett seemed overpowering, her opponents slumping as if speechless. The room fell silent as the clip played. Then Leavitt pressed again, This time, the unedited version appeared. It showed the Republican congressman presenting a string of damaging data against Crockett's argument before her interruption. Her triumph was just a loud interjection, expertly edited to look like a victory. The clip ended. The screen went black. Leavitt turned to Crockett, her voice cutting. "This is the truth, Congresswoman. The clip you and your allies spread online was manipulated. It didn't reflect the full debate. It didn't reflect the truth. It only reflected one thing. You're willing to turn the media into a tool to glorify yourself." Murmurs swept the room. Some reporters blushed, having shared the clip without verifying it. Crockett forced a stiff smile. "That's just how media works. We can't control every edit." Leavitt cut in, "Can't control." Then explained this email. The screen lit up, showing a leaked email screenshot. A journalist messaging Crockett's team saying, "We'll edit the clip to highlight your part. Let us know 3 talking points to emphasize." The room exploded in noise. Reporters whispered to each other. "My God," caught red-handed. Crockett slammed the table. Her voice rushed. "That's just normal media coordination." Leavitt didn't raise her voice, calmly flipping to another document. Normal coordination. She held up a contract copy, over $800,000 in media consulting fees, paid to a firm co-founded by the same journalist who's always by your side. This isn't coordination. This is bribery. The room went silent. Cameras zoomed in on Crockett's ashen face. Leavitt pressed on like a relentless prosecutor. "I checked. Over the past year, every time a scandal threatened you, at least 5 articles appeared simultaneously from the same group of reporters, using the same language, the same narrative, all tied financially to that firm." The screen displayed a comparison chart. Dates, scandals, articles, authors, funding sources. Each line was like a knife, slashing through Crockett's carefully crafted justice warrior image. A soft cough came from the press row, then silence. No one dared interrupt. Leavitt looked up, her voice firm. "A free press is a pillar of American democracy. It's not your personal stage, but you've turned it into a tool to stage your image. You don't seek truth, you seek the spotlight." Her closing line landed like a gavel. The room reeled, many reporters looking down, avoiding the cameras. Crockett sat rigid, hands clenched, eyes blazing, as if to retort, but her throat caught. No words came out. In that moment, everyone understood that the media manipulation blow hadn't just dismantled Crockett's favorite weapon. It exposed the hypocrisy behind her viral fame. The room, once tilted toward Crockett, now fully swung to Karoline Leavitt, the young but razor-sharp figure methodically unmasking her opponent before the nation. The congressional chamber's air had shifted decisively toward Karoline Leavitt after her devastating strike on Jasmine Crockett's media tactics. Crockett tried to steady herself, sipping water, but her hands visibly shook. Viewers watching live on TV and social media were glued to every moment. Karoline looked straight at her opponent, then down at her briefcase, pulling out a new file, its dark purple cover bold with stark text, "Impeachment and Partisanship." "Ladies and gentlemen," Leavitt began, her voice not loud but clear, each word commanding attention. "We've talked about money, foreign ties, media. Now let's talk about one of the most serious tools the Constitution grants Congress, impeachment." She emphasized the last word, pausing to let it sink in, drawing every eye in the room. Leavitt flipped to the first page, reading clearly. In 2021, Jasmine Crockett repeatedly spoke in favor of impeaching President Trump. "I'm not here to debate whether you disliked him. I'm here to discuss how you used this tool as a partisan weapon." The large screen behind her lit up, showing an old tweet from Crockett. "Trump must be impeached, even if we have to bend the rules to do it." The room buzzed. Crockett raised her hand to object. That was just emotional rhetoric, not official policy. Leavitt held up a transcript, her voice firm. "Emotion isn't law. Emotion can't override the Constitution." She pulled out a small dark green leather-bound book, holding it high. "This is the U.S. Constitution. I'm sure you swore to uphold and protect it. So let's read together." She flipped it open, reading aloud into the mic. Article 2, Section 4. "The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for, and conviction of, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors." Leavitt looked up, locking eyes with Crockett. Show me where the Constitution allows impeachment because we don't like the president. The room fell dead silent. A few congressmen in the back bowed their heads, no one daring to interrupt. Crockett's face tightened, her lips pursed. Leavitt continued, her voice softening but sharper than ever. History gives us precedents. In 1868, Andrew Johnson was impeached, but acquitted because even his enemies knew impeachment couldn't be a power game. In 1974, Nixon faced impeachment, and only clear evidence forced his resignation. In 1998, Bill Clinton was impeached, but the process still followed procedure and justice. Then came Trump's era. What happened? An entire process was weaponized, turned into a tool for one side to destroy the other. Murmurs rose again. Leavitt flipped to another page, projecting an image, a secret Capitol basement meeting, Republicans barred at the door. This is proof of how you and your allies treated a sacred constitutional tool. Impeachment stopped being an open process to protect justice. It became a closed trial, a backstage power game. Crockett cut in, her voice shrill. We did it to protect the country, to stop a dangerous president. Leavitt didn't hesitate, pulling the mic closer. Protect the country. How? By hiding inconvenient evidence, by editing testimony, by denying the minorities' rights in Congress. That's not protecting America. That's protecting your ego. The screen lit up again, showing a video of Crockett in a closed-door meeting with allies. We need a hard hit to ensure Trump can't run again. Impeachment will do that, whether we have strong enough evidence or not. The clip ended, the room erupting in noise. Crockett paled, fumbling with her mic, but the audience had seen it all. Leavitt calmly closed the file, her gaze fixed on Crockett. Impeachment is a tool to protect the republic, but you treated it like a political club, a weapon for your side. You turned a sacred process into your personal chess game. A heavy silence fell. Reporters typed nonstop. Online viewers flooded comments. She nailed it. Crockett exposed again. Karoline Leavitt gently set the Constitution on the table, leaning close to the mic, her voice low but resounding. Impeachment is not a weapon for your ego. The words landed, like a final nail in the case. Crockett sat motionless, breathing heavily, her eyes lost. The room, once certain Leavitt would be the one crushed, now fully swung to the young woman, and everyone understood. Once impeachment, the ultimate partisan weapon, was exposed as a selfish game. Nothing could salvage Jasmine Crockett's image in this historic hearing. Leavitt's impeachment is not a weapon for your ego, still echoed like an aftershock in the hearing room. Jasmine Crockett bit her lip, her eyes darting to the press for support, but finding only cold stares. Leavitt, giving her opponent no time to catch her breath, calmly opened her briefcase once more. This time she pulled out a black file, its label stark, evidence suppression. Those two words alone thickened the air in the room. Leavitt looked up, her gaze piercing. It's time we talk about real transparency. Jasmine, you often claim to fight for truth, for justice, but this file shows the opposite. It shows you've suppressed evidence, edited testimony, and staged narratives to benefit yourself. She pressed the remote, and the large screen lit up. A comparison chart appeared, split into 3 columns. Original, Crockett's released version, outcome. The first row read, witness, a testimony. The original stated, I saw no clear violation in the meeting. But Crockett's version to the press read, I saw nothing at all. A subtle cut, erasing the part, affirming no violation. The room gasped. Reporters typed frantically. Crockett grabbed her mic, her voice rushed. That's a minor semantic difference. It doesn't change the substance. Leavitt cut in, her voice firm. No change in substance. When you erased words affirming innocence, you turned exculpatory testimony into incriminating evidence. That's not editing. That's staging. She pressed the remote again. The second row appeared, 2022, financial report. The original read, no evidence found of campaign funds being misused. Crockett's public version omitted that entirely, replacing it with a vague, expenditures need further review. A congressman in the back shook his head, letting out a soft sigh. Whispers spread, and no one defended her. Leavitt continued, her voice lowering, heavy with gravity. You didn't just trim words, you twisted the truth. And when the truth is twisted, the public's trust is betrayed. The screen changed again, showing a video from a closed-door hearing. In the full record, Witness B stated, I received no direction from the White House. But Crockett's released clip kept only, I received direction, spliced to completely reverse the meaning. A chaotic burst of noise filled the room. Some reporters couldn't help but exclaim, oh my God, The committee chair banged the gavel for order, but the shock had spread. Crockett, trembling, argued, "I didn't know that transcript was faulty. That was my staff's error." Leavitt pounced on the opening. "If it was a staff error, why did you use that spliced clip in a national TV speech? Why did you emphasize it 3 times, calling it undeniable evidence? Your staff doesn't make your choices." The room gradually fell deathly silent. The murmurs, the mocking laughter from earlier, had vanished completely. Now everyone sat upright, eyes glued to Leavitt, like students listening to a teacher expose a cheating scandal. Crockett, once loud and domineering, suddenly seemed strangely small in her chair. Leavitt closed the file, placing it on the table with finality. Her voice rang out, not loud, but strong enough to pierce every mind. "Truth doesn't need editing. Justice doesn't need splicing. But you, Jasmine, chose to suppress data, cut testimony, and craft a false narrative. And today, the entire nation is witnessing that truth." The room went still. Even those who had mocked Leavitt earlier didn't dare breathe heavily now. The atmosphere shifted from chaotic noise to a heavy silence. The silence of shock, of realizing that a justice warrior had been unmasked in the spotlight. In that moment, everyone understood. This confrontation had transcended political debate. This was the moment a career teetered at its roots. Because trust, the most fragile thing in politics, once lost, never returns. The tense air in the hearing room, still thick from the exposure of manipulated testimony, hadn't yet dissipated. As the audience and media whispered, Karoline Leavitt calmly opened her briefcase again. She pulled out a thick file, its silver-gray cover stark, labeled boldly, "Personal Finances and Assets." The sharp thud of the file, hitting the table, made Jasmine Crockett flinch, her body jerking slightly. Cameras zoomed in, and every watching eye locked onto Leavitt's every move. Karoline looked up, her voice calm but icy. "We've talked about words, evidence, and media. But in the end, what can't be hidden is money. And today, we'll look straight at the personal finances and interests of Jasmine Crockett." She flipped to the first page, and the large screen behind her lit up. Numbers appeared clearly. Net worth 2019, $250,000. Net worth 2024, $2.7 million. The room erupted in gasps, a near tenfold leap in just 5 years. Leavitt held up the report, her voice steady. "I ask everyone in this room, how does a congresswoman, earning a public salary of about $174,000 a year, multiply her wealth 10 times in such a short period?" Crockett reached for her mic, but Leavitt pressed the remote, and the screen shifted to a timeline. The left column listed dates. The middle showed funds flowing into accounts. The right listed political decisions. May 3, 2021. Leavitt read, "Jefferson and Cole, a law firm with consulting contracts from international energy conglomerates, paid $45,000 in consulting fees. A week later, you voted against the bill allowing expanded domestic gas drilling." The room's noise faded into tense silence. Leavitt flipped to another line. September 14, 2022. A $60,000 payment from Progress for Tomorrow, funded by foreign businessmen. 3 days later, you signed a letter calling for reduced taxes on importing companies. Crockett shook her head. Her voice rushed. "These are legal payments, consulting and support fees any congressperson might receive." Leavitt cut in, her eyes flashing steel. "Legal doesn't mean ethical, and consulting contracts aren't a free pass to enrich yourself at voters' expense." I asked directly, "Did voters elect you to get rich or to serve them?" The question landed like a hammer, silencing the room. Cameras zoomed in on Jasmine Crockett's face. Sweat rolled down her temples, her lips pressed tight, her eyes darting for a rebuttal, but her throat caught. Leavitt didn't stop. She flipped another page, her voice slow, each word a hammer blow to her opponent's defenses. "In your 2023 disclosure, you reported 2 new properties worth over $1.1 million, purchased months after a major donor funneled money into your fund. Coincidence or a reward?" The screen displayed photos of 2 luxury homes, one in Dallas, one in Washington, D.C., captioned, "Purchased 2023. The room buzzed with sharp whispers. A congressman muttered loud enough for a mic to catch, "No way, that's random." Crockett leaned toward her mic, her voice faltering. "I have the right to buy property with my legal earnings." Leavitt straightened, her gaze cold. "You do. But voters also have the right to know why. While they struggle to pay rent, their representatives suddenly got rich through donations that strangely align with every vote. They have the right to ask, who really owns that seat? Voters or the money men? The murmurs stopped. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Reporters didn't dare look away from their screens, jotting every number, every date. Some Democratic congressmen bowed their heads, avoiding the camera's gaze. Leavitt closed the file, resting her hands on it like sealing a verdict. Her voice rang out, low and firm, like a sentencing. Jasmine, you can dodge questions about your words, blame staff for edited evidence. But one thing you can't deny, money doesn't lie. It shows every priority, every choice. And today, the money has told the truth about you. She leaned closer to the mic, her voice just loud enough but far-reaching. Did voters elect you to get rich or to serve them? The room was deathly silent. Cameras zoomed in on Jasmine Crockett's face. This time, no confident smile, no fiery glare, only unease, silence, and a truth laid bare. She was utterly speechless before Karoline Leavitt's devastating strike. The silence following Karoline Leavitt's final question still enveloped the room. Every camera lens zoomed in on Jasmine Crockett, capturing every bead of sweat rolling down her temples, every tremble of her hands gripping the file. The silence stretched like an invisible verdict. Then suddenly, Crockett sprang up, clutching the mic with both hands, shouting so loudly it screeched. "Liar!" The yell echoed, bouncing off the walls, startling some reporters who snapped their heads up, a few congressmen wincing. Crockett, face flushed with rage, pointed straight at Leavitt, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're just a liar. Everything you've presented is just fragments, a staged smear to tarnish me. I won't sit here and be lectured on ethics by a naive kid." The room buzzed, some shouts of order, order, from the chair rising weakly. The scene exploded like a boxing match, where the losing fighter, unhinged, swings wildly. Crockett continued, her voice breaking. "You want to tear me down, make me a laughingstock? I won't let that happen. You don't deserve to sit here." Karoline Leavitt sat still, back straight, her face unmoved. She let Crockett vent her rage for a few seconds, then gave a slight, calm smile. Without shouting, without raising her voice, she leaned toward the mic, speaking in a low, slow tone that rang clear. "I have evidence. What do you have besides screams?" The words landed like a steel hammer, silencing the shouts still echoing in Crockett's throat. The room froze for a few seconds, then erupted in laughter from the back rows. Some reporters burst out laughing, quickly covering their mouths, a few congressmen unable to stifle chuckles. Cameras swung to Crockett, her face red, eyes wide with embarrassment. The laughter made her fury seem out of place, like an actor losing their role mid-stage. Crockett gripped the mic, trying to speak, but the chaotic sounds only made her seem more helpless. Leavitt needed no more words. She leaned back in her chair, still smiling faintly. The contrast was stark. One side calm, controlled, the other unhinged, frantic. The media, initially expecting a Leavitt takedown, now pivoted, laptops buzzing with headlines. Crockett meltdown on live TV. Leavitt holds firm amid chaos. The room stirred again, but no longer with the mocking whispers aimed at Leavitt from the start. Now it was hushed discussion. Whispers, "This young woman is razor sharp." Crockett's completely lost it. The chair banged the gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Crockett, realizing she'd gone too far, quickly sat down, her mic still trembling before her. But her image, screaming into the mic, face flushed, was now etched in the minds of the audience, and on millions of screens, broadcasting live. Leavitt leaned forward, gently gathering her files, her eyes no longer needing to meet Crockett's. She knew, once her opponent lost composure, the fight was nearly over. No shouting, no berating, just one calm sentence from Leavitt was enough to shift the tide. The room quieted, but not the awkward silence of Crockett's exposed evidence. It was the silence after laughter. People waited to see Leavitt's next move, and from that moment, no one thought of Karoline as naive. In their eyes, she had become the one fully commanding this stage. The first climax had exploded, and the one who lost control wasn't Karoline Leavitt. It was Jasmine Crockett, who had confidently believed she'd destroy Leavitt. In the end, her own anger exposed her weakness, while her opponent, with just a calm smile, claimed the entire audience and media. The chuckles still echoed through the room after Karoline Leavitt's biting retort, when the atmosphere suddenly shifted to dead silence. Everyone sensed Leavitt hadn't unleashed her full arsenal. She gently closed the old file, then placed a new one on the table, its matte black cover thick and heavy, labeled starkly, "Final Evidence." An invisible jolt ran through the hearing room, cameras zooming in, reporters leaning forward in anticipation. Jasmine Crockett paled slightly, her lips pursed, her hand trembling on the mic. Leavitt slowly opened the file, her voice steady, but each word heavy as stone. "Throughout this hearing, you've repeatedly denied, repeatedly blamed others, from staff to media. But the truth can't be buried forever. And today, I'll show America undeniable evidence." She pressed the remote, and the large screen lit up. Text appeared. Internal email, May 14th, 2023. The email's contents displayed clearly. "Jasmine, we've edited the testimony. Cut the no violations part to fit the narrative. The press won't notice. Sender, a close aide to Crockett. Recipient, Jasmine Crockett's official email." The room gasped in unison. Camera flashes erupted. Crockett lunged for her mic, her voice shrill and trembling. "I never saw that email. It could be fake. I'm not responsible for what my staff writes." Leavitt didn't miss a beat. Pressing again, the screen shifted to an email interface. A clip from a whistleblower, showing the original action. Crockett herself clicking reply, typing, "Good, make sure no one keeps the full version." The evidence was irrefutable. The room erupted in stunned gasps. Crockett's face went from red to ashen. This is edited. I didn't." Leavitt leaned into the mic, her voice icy. "If it's fake, explain why the original email was verified by Congress's system. It has a timestamp, a digital signature. That's not fake, Congresswoman. That's you." The room buzzed with chatter. Some Democratic congressmen behind Crockett bowed their heads, avoiding camera lenses. Reporters snapped photos, some muttering, "This is over." Leavitt wasn't done. She pressed the remote again, and an audio clip played. Crockett's voice filled the air. "If we keep the full testimony, there's no basis for an investigation. Cut the extra parts. The public will never know." Her voice, unmistakable. The room froze, then exploded in chaos. Crockett stood, shouting, "That's not my voice. Someone faked it." But Leavitt was ready. She held up a certification from an independent audio lab, its red seal flashing on the screen. Analysis result. Voice in file matches Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's sample at 99.8%. The room detonated. Some congressmen exclaimed aloud. Audience members gasped. The chair banged the gavel repeatedly for order, to no avail. Leavitt waited for the chaos to subside, then delivered her final blow. She pressed the remote, and an unreleased video played. Crockett at a private fundraiser, sitting beside a donor, laughing as she said, "Don't worry, I'll handle the documents so they don't trouble you. Your money won't go to waste." The room exploded for the third time. Reporters shouted into phones to newsrooms. Tweets fired off, rapidly. Crockett, pale, sank back into her chair, stammering, That's out of context. I didn't," but the room's angry murmurs drowned her out. Leavitt stood tall, closing the file, her gaze sweeping the room. "Throughout this hearing, you've called yourself a warrior for justice, but the evidence here shows something else. You lied, you hid, and you sold out the people's trust." The room erupted in applause, not scattered, but a roaring wave. Some Democratic congressmen couldn't resist joining in, while reporters set down keyboards, their eyes fixed, as if etching the moment into their hearts. Jasmine Crockett slumped in her chair, her face gray, eyes vacant. No words left to defend herself. The knockout blow had landed, decisive and merciless. In the eyes of the audience and media, the battle had a clear winner and loser, and the winner was none other than Karoline Leavitt. The applause still echoed as Karoline Leavitt took one more step. She didn't smile, didn't wave, but maintained her calm demeanor. As the room began to regain order, Leavitt leaned close to the mic, her voice low, but cutting like a cold blade. "Now I have one direct question for you, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. No deflections, no edits, just a straightforward question." The screen lit up again, displaying the barrage of emails, audio, and videos just revealed. The damning evidence from moments before. Leavitt pointed to them, then locked eyes with Crockett. "Did you or did you not know that your team suppressed, edited, and hid this evidence to deceive the public?" The room fell into a breathless silence. Every eye turned to Crockett. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail of her face, her eyes darting frantically, lips twitching, hands trembling on the mic. The air was thick, as if everyone awaited a confession. Crockett took a deep breath, her lips moving. But she faltered, her voice hoarse. After a moment, her face ashen, she forced a weak smile, gripping the mic tightly. And then, in desperation, she blurted, "I plead the fifth." The words landed heavy as a gavel on stone. The room exploded in outraged and stunned murmurs. Some Democratic congressmen stared in disbelief. A few reporters clutched their heads, whispering, "She invoked the fifth on live TV?" The chair banged the gavel repeatedly, but the shockwave was too great to contain. Leavitt sat upright, her eyes icy. She waited for the noise to subside, then calmly adjusted her mic. Her voice, low but clear, rang out. "Sometimes, silence says it all." The words fell, and the room sank into tense silence. Everyone understood this was no longer a debate. It was a public collapse. Invoking the fifth may be a legal right, but to the millions watching live, it was as good as an admission. Cameras panned the crowd. Some reporters nodded faintly. Some congressmen closed their eyes, shaking their heads in dismay. And Karoline Leavitt, the young woman dismissed as naive from the start, now sat firmly in control of the battlefield. In that moment, everyone knew the fight was over. No more evidence was needed. No more questions. Just one sentence, one silence, had reshaped Jasmine Crockett's career before the nation's eyes. The echo of Karoline Leavitt's "sometimes silence says it all" still hung in the air as the hearing room turned into a storm. The chair banged the gavel repeatedly, but the murmurs, chatter, and ringing phones were beyond control. Outside, dozens of reporters jostled, live streaming every second. And within minutes of the hearing's end, what happened in that room flooded every social media platform. Clips of Jasmine Crockett shouting, "Liar," then invoking the fifth, spread across Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. Side-by-side edits juxtaposed the moment. Crockett, face red, screaming into the mic. Leavitt smiling calmly, delivering, "I have evidence." "What do you have besides screams?" Netizens shared the under 1 minute video like a manifesto. Within an hour, the hashtag #speechless shot to the top national trend. Alongside it were #Leavitt victory, #Crockett meltdown, and even #Jen's strength. Memes proliferated. Crockett's stunned face captioned, "When you realize the fifth won't save you." Leavitt's smile turned into a viral Instagram sticker. The press didn't sit idly by. CNN, which had initially run the Chiron Crockett School's young press secretary, was forced to change it to "Leavitt stuns in Capitol hearing." Fox News didn't miss a beat. Karoline Leavitt shuts down Jasmine Crockett. A new GOP star is born. Even the New York Times had to run a neutral but bitter headline for Crockett. Moment of silence. Crockett invokes fifth in fiery exchange. Evening programs all led with the story. NBC replayed the "I plead the fifth" clip with commentary. In politics, there are moments that define careers. This is one of them. A Politico editor commented on air, "Crockett was seen as the progressive star of the Democratic Party, but tonight, that image was destroyed in a matter of minutes." Meanwhile, Leavitt, dismissed as naive, became the central figure. On social media, the mockery of Crockett echoed loudly. One account wrote, "She came to destroy Leavitt, but destroyed herself instead." Another quipped, "Next time, bring arguments, not just yelling." Netizens mass-produced images of a mute button next to Crockett's face, captioned, "The real Fifth Amendment." On late-night talk shows, commentators who usually leaned Democratic struggled to defend her. A guest on MSNBC sighed, "I may not agree with Leavitt on many policies, but I have to admit, tonight, she controlled the entire stage." Crockett lost her composure, her image, and her chance. Meanwhile, in Jasmine Crockett's Texas district, local voters buzzed nonstop. Some called her office, leaving angry voicemails. "We elected you to represent us, not to scream into a mic and invoke the Fifth Amendment." Local papers ran a cold headline, "District embarrassed, Crockett brings shame home." In stark contrast, in New Hampshire, where Karoline Leavitt grew up, local papers hailed her as a new generation icon. A piece in the Concord Monitor read, "The Gen Z girl once mocked for her youth has now proven that poise and evidence can topple any arrogance." Constitutional law scholars weighed in too. Professor Alan Dershowitz commented in an interview, "When a politician invokes the Fifth Amendment in a public setting, they may save themselves legally, but politically, it's a collapse." That night, every newscast revolved around the same message. Karoline Leavitt took down Jasmine Crockett, One left the hearing room, head held high, with images spreading across social media. The other left with vacant eyes, stumbling steps, and a career crumbling amid the public's mocking laughter. Within less than 24 hours, the image balance flipped completely. Jasmine Crockett, once confident in dominating with her booming rhetoric, now became a punchline. And Karoline Leavitt, the naive young girl, was now seen as the new icon of resolve and next-generation political power. And as the next morning dawned, all of America had seen it clearly that showdown was no longer just a debate. It was a media earthquake, where one star collapsed in silence and another blazed into brilliance. All of America could talk about nothing else but the Leavitt Crockett showdown. Morning news shows the next day all opened with the same image. Karoline Leavitt sitting upright, eyes icy sharp, while Jasmine Crockett dazedly uttered the four words, "I plead the fifth." Major papers all analyzed it. A young woman, often dismissed as inexperienced, had taken down a seasoned opponent right in the heart of Washington power, and audiences, no matter their side, had to admit this was a turning point. In a few days, Karoline Leavitt became a constant name on TV news, talk shows, and op-eds. Fox News called her the new conservative star. The Washington Examiner emphasized, Gen Z just proved it can play in the big leagues. Even some reporters who usually criticized the GOP had to concede the truth. Leavitt had shown poise, control, and evidence deployment, like a seasoned prosecutor. Jasmine Crockett's career, meanwhile, went into freefall. Allies who once eagerly backed her now dodged her, no one wanting to share a frame. Texas local papers ran stinging headlines. Crockett brings shame to district. On social media, her image screaming, "Liar," then invoking the fifth, became the symbol of arrogance punished. Some voters even held community meetings, holding signs reading, "We need truth, not theatrics." Meanwhile, Leavitt seized the moment to reinforce her message. Politics isn't a stage for shouting, but a place for truth to speak. Universities invited her to speak on transparency and young people in politics. The press wrote about her as a new icon of Gen Z and power. People likened the hearing to a thesis defense, where Leavitt proved she had the mettle to sit shoulder to shoulder with Washington's most veteran faces. Crockett, by contrast, became a textbook example in politics classes of what not to do. Professors used the clip itself to teach, "This is what happens when arrogance trumps truth." A Wall Street Journal columnist wrote, Jasmine Crockett didn't lose for lack of preparation. She lost because she believed noise could substitute for evidence, but screams never beat truth. The aftershocks went further. Some political analysts said the moment could reshape an entire generation of young voters. They witnessed a Gen Zer, not just daring to face immense pressure, but flipping the script with intellect and proof. To many, Leavitt turned youth into an asset, proof that political renewal wasn't a distant dream. International media covered it too. The Guardian called it a moment of accountability rarely seen in U.S. politics. Japan's Nikkei Daily wrote, "A Gen Z politician from New Hampshire made all of Washington sit up and listen." In Europe, Le Figaro described Leavitt as the new face of the GOP, who threw Democrats off balance. And then, as the camera lights still shone, Karoline Leavitt stepped out to face the press after the hearing officially ended. She didn't deliver a long speech, didn't rant triumphantly. She just looked straight at the hundreds of reporters thrusting mics, giving a slight smile. Authenticity beats arrogance. Truth beats noise. That succinct message was quoted everywhere instantly. It became a slogan printed on posters, memes, and even t-shirts going viral online. People repeated it like a mantra for an era of noisy but insincere politics. Then, when a reporter asked what final message she had for Jasmine Crockett, Karoline Leavitt tilted her head slightly, her eyes twinkling with wit, her voice soft with that sweet northeastern sarcasm laced with full Southern-style burn. "Bless your heart." That moment, the entire press room erupted in laughter, applause, and cheers. Not mocking noise, but recognition that a young politician had just proven her mettle in an unforgettable way. From then on, Karoline Leavitt's name wasn't just tied to her White House press secretary title or a failed candidacy. It was linked to the image of a young GOP star who proved Gen Z could play in the big leagues. And Jasmine Crockett, who entered the fight with arrogance, became a bitter lesson for anyone who believes shouting can drown out truth's voice. In law schools, in political training sessions, people will recount this story as proof of a simple truth that Karoline spoke for millions. Authenticity beats arrogance. Truth beats noise. And in the audience's memory, that bless your heart would forever be the perfect punctuation, gentle but potent enough to dismantle an opponent's entire arrogance before the nation. The showdown between Karoline Leavitt and Jasmine Crockett in the congressional hearing wasn't just a dramatic TV moment. It was a litmus test for the true nature of American politics today. Every detail in the story laid bare the stark contrast between two styles. Leavitt's calm, prepared, evidence-based approach stood in total opposition to Crockett's arrogance, impulsiveness, and lack of control. When Crockett screamed, "Liar," into the mic at the climax, audiences saw a politician lose her self-control. In contrast, Leavitt's crisp retort, "I have evidence. What do you have besides screams?" became the icon of reason's power over noise. The evidence Leavitt presented, from emails verified by Congress's system, an audio recording matching Crockett's voice at 99.8%, to video of Crockett taking donor money and promising to handle documents, didn't just leave her opponent ashen. It turned the entire room into a public courtroom. The moment Crockett invoked the Fifth Amendment, hoping for escape, became the defining image of collapse. A politician choosing silence when transparency was needed most. And when Leavitt closed with the light but razor sharp, "Bless your heart," audiences understood this wasn't just a debate. It was a lesson in how truth can topple arrogance. The lesson for Americans is to beware politicians who rely on bombastic rhetoric, viral clips, or identity to mask the truth. The lesson for U.S. leaders is power doesn't come from shouting, but from honesty, preparation, and transparency. As Leavitt proved, authenticity beats arrogance. Truth beats noise. This isn't just a slogan. It's the foundation needed to restore public trust in American politics. If you see that truth is always stronger than noise, hit subscribe to join us for more political stories. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, where truth will speak again.